Welcome along to the final instant reaction podcast of the season, because the Seahawks have been beaten in very disappointing fashion, and that is an understatement, against the LA Rams, hammered at home in the playoffs, and the season is over. I've got an awful lot to say about this. I think this might be the longest podcast that we do, so apologies in advance for the length. But I hope that many of you will just want to get into this and want to hear us getting into it as well. And that might provide a little crumb of comfort after what you've just watched. Anyway, I'll tell you what I think in a bit. Robbie, what is your instant reaction to what you have just seen?
Oh, man, of course you're going to start with me instant reaction. I'm pissed off, man. This was an annoying game. I mean, it was really frustrating from the start. Like, I didn't understand. I really didn't understand our game plan coming into the game. Like, we just looked like lethargic. We didn't look like we wanted to be playing. It almost looked like we were just like going through the motions and just hoping the ball would bounce our way. And I mean, we just lacked creativity. I mean, honestly, there was just no creativity in the offensive game plan. And I think our defense, for the most part, played pretty well. I mean, you can only ask them to do so much when, I feel like the Rams had the ball for, majority of the first quarter for sure. And then, going into the second quarter, they felt like they had the ball the whole time too. And like, the defense, I think, did as much as they could possibly do without getting a couple turnovers to help swing it in our direction. And I got a lot to say too. I'm gonna try to hold off on saying everything, but there needs to be some big changes this offseason, and I hope that actually comes our way.
Adam, what is your instant reaction to the game tonight?
I was trying to sum up some thoughts in the last few minutes of the game, and I think my overriding thought was we as fans spent all week wondering if Goff was going to play, if Wilford was going to play, Aaron Donald, their players, their personnel, who they had, Jalen Ramsey, all of this. But actually, McVay and Staley just coached around everything that went against the Rams today. They had one quarterback in an ambulance. They had another quarterback with 3 pins in his thumb. They had Aaron Donald off the field for most of the second half. And they just completely outcoached Seattle. And in previous playoff losses, there's been things you could say to criticize coaching staff and, did they get that right? Did they get that right? But the chasm in which they got outclassed on the coaching today is my overriding thought. And there's a 5-year deal that the head coach has just signed, and that, the coaching staff can't become any more Pete Carrolls than it already is. So it has left me slightly wondering where we're going to go from a coaching standpoint. And that's what's given me, this is why I'm more concerned this year than any of the previous playoff losses.
An absolutely valid concern there, Adam, as well, because you're right. I mean, when you actually look at this game, and Sean McVay needed to handle a lot, and he had a lot on his plate and coached around it. I mean, when you're actually watching the LA Rams offense, both with Wolford initially and then with Goff, who is throwing. I mean, I can't imagine what it must be like to throw with pins in your thumb 2 weeks after surgery on your thumb. I mean, that the wound's not even going to have necessarily healed either. So that is a really difficult situation. And for the Rams to move the ball as well as they did, to run the ball as well as they did, you could clearly see what they were trying to do, and they had a lot of success with it. They won both offensive lines. For the Seahawks to be as bad as they were on offense, to have no answers, to have none at all to supply Russell Wilson with some rhythm, with an opportunity just to move the football, maybe even, listen, they didn't have to, it's not a case of coming out and throwing it all over the park and putting 30 points, 35 points on the board. It was simply a case for the type of game they wanted to play was to have some sustained drives, to move the chains, to try and play the field position battle a little bit more, to keep it tight so that you can put pressure on Goff or Wolford or whoever was playing. And they just couldn't do that. I mean, Russell Wilson, he's clearly not played well enough for a few weeks, but where were the ideas and the decisions and the plan to make life a little bit easier for him? You know what you're going to get from Aaron Donald and Leonard Floyd. You've played this team twice already. You play them twice a year. There was just nothing. And as the game went along, there weren't any adjustments either. There was nothing just to get Seattle into a bit of an offensive rhythm. And it just sums up with the numbers to be 2 of 13 on third down. They didn't get a third down conversion until there was 3 minutes and 53 left in the third quarter. That's on coaching. And you're right, Adam. They were just thoroughly outclassed from a coaching perspective. No plan, no adjustments. The Rams had answers. The Seahawks didn't. It's not the only issue. They were beaten up front. The Rams were the bully. They won both lines of scrimmage, O-line and D-line. They took their chances. But this was just a wretched performance, Robbie. It is a really bad performance. And I have to say, predictable as well. I mean, we talked a lot in the off-season and in the early stage of the season about some of the concerns we had. There was a lot of pushback for that. You know, sometimes I feel a little bit like Seahawks fans treat the team like it's a Belle Delphine OnlyFans site. And, you know, we kind of got a little bit criticized for a consequence of that. It really pains me, Robbie, to see how obvious some of these issues were. When Pete Carroll is asked about third downs 2 weeks ago, he's brushed it off. He just said, yeah, we've not been good there. When people asked him about whether he's concerned with his offense, no, I'm not concerned at all. Russell Wilson's asked about whether he's concerned. I'm not concerned about the deep ball. We'll get that right. They never got it right, Robbie. They were complacent.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you said about, you know, just about the coaching staff in general. I mean, I think Pete Carroll this offseason really needs to relinquish some control and give it over to an offensive and defensive staff that, you know, has a new line of thinking. You know, we've run the same offense and defense essentially for the last, since what, 2012? And I mean, teams have figured us out, and we have no answer for it. We used to be really good at second half adjustments, and you'd see some changes. But man, even just getting like one first down felt like it was like pulling teeth. Like completing a pass felt like it was just awful. I mean, all around, offensive line played bad, Russ played bad. I mean, and you know what happened to some like some screen pass? I know they were only rushing 4, but I mean, try a screen pass, try a or you know, to a running back, try like you know, some you know, read option plays or something. I mean, something where it gives Russ some ability to change stuff. And I just don't like. I mean, honestly, Ken Norton Jr. should be fired for the first half of the season for how he played, and Shoddy should be fired for the second half of the season the way they played. I mean, this is just unacceptable for, you know, a team that, you know, I think we have the right tools, right pieces, and it's just like, you know, I don't remember her name, Stacy Joe. She posted something about how the philosophy is different than the talent that we have, and I couldn't agree more. Like, our philosophy just doesn't match the talent that we have. We need someone to come in and get some more creativity. And you know, Pete's gonna have to give up a little bit of control because his style of ball is it's just not working. And I'm not saying Pete Ball doesn't work, because like clearly he's won a lot of games, and you know we finished 12-4 the season. So a lot of people are going to point to that and say, you know, oh, we're 12-4, won the division. You know, Pete Ball does work, but at the same time, I mean, how tired are you getting into the fourth quarter and being like, it's still a nail biter against a team we should be blowing out by 30 or whatever? And I'm not saying the Rams are that team. Clearly, they have the number 1 defense for a reason. Aaron Donald was pissed off today, and this is why I didn't want to play this team. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to play a team that I knew us too well, and Sean McVay just owns us, and it just showed. It just showed. I mean, in all facets of the game. I mean, I'll be honest with you. When DJ Reed fumbled the football, I turned the TV off. I went and made myself a coffee. I grabbed my my baby Yoda cup, Roku, and I just started drinking some coffee and I started listening to it on the radio because I was just done. I was just so over it. I was about to break something. So, yeah, this offseason, like I said, there just needs to be a lot of changes, and and it starts with the coaching staff, and then you know we're gonna have to make some seriously tough decisions. You know, on our team. Like, you know, we have to wonder about, is Bobby worth it? You know, what's the situation with Russ? You know, there's a lot of things that are going to need to be answered this offseason. And unfortunately, we just don't have a lot of draft picks. So, you know, we have to talk about Jamal Adams. What's going to happen with him? You know, it's just crazy. This is, it feels like an uncomfortable time as a Seahawks fan, especially, I mean, and granted, we just lost, so I might be talking with like a lot of emotion here, but it's just super frustrating.
I want to. I think we really should talk about what comes next. Now, I think we should have a whole section of the podcast on that. Before we kind of just focus back on the game, Adam, I do want to pick up on on one of the things really that Robbie's talked about, and it is the identity, and you mentioned it as well. And I just wonder a little bit, having watched two of the first two playoff games today, whether the Seahawks are actually consumed by identity. It always seems to be the thing, let Russ cook, Pete ball, play in a certain way. I've just watched the Colts today, and I couldn't really tell you what Frank Reich's identity of style of play is. He kind of just builds a plan based on the players available to him. And all right, the Colts lost today, and it was hardly a flawless performance by them. But they've gone to Buffalo, who are the most informed team in the league, and punched them in the nose, and could easily have taken that game to overtime or maybe even won it with Philip Rivers, who he's either 40 or nearly 40 years old. He's coming to the very end of his career, and they've put a plan together, and they've put the pieces together, and they can go and be competitive. And I'm watching the Seahawks, and they're trying to play a certain way, and they're trying to make a game a certain way. And when they go into a game like this, trying to play Pete Carroll football, it has to be close and it has to be tight, and we're going to win it at the end. Or if they're playing let Russ cook, it's got to be about scoreboard pressure. And I'm kind of thinking, is there too much about identity, really? Should it not just be about, this is what you have, this is how we're going to play because this is what we have, and we're going to make the most of what we have? Because when you're watching this game today, they're not making the most of Russell Wilson. They're not making the most of DK Metcalf. They're not making the most of Tyler Lockett. I don't think they're making the most of the defensive players on their roster. It's almost too much.
And if you're playing Pete ball, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Rob, but if you're playing Pete ball, why did we only run the ball with Carson 16 times? Why did Russell Wilson throw 27 times and complete 6.4 yards per pass? Carson was running really well. Why? If you're gonna play, if Pete wants to play that way, run the damn football. It was working early, so I don't know why they didn't. Sorry, go ahead.
You're right. It worked early. I think the first 3 runs went for 22 yards, but instead they tried to sort of dink and dunk a little bit and get a pass and establish a passing game, which was just an invitation for Aaron Donald and Leonard Floyd to win the game for the LA Rams. And I think it's worse than that, Robbie, because one thing when you look at the passing numbers so Russell Wilson threw it 27 times. But we also need to include the 5 sacks that were included there, and the 4 scrambles. None of those scrambles were designed runs for Russell Wilson. I don't think they were. So you can add another 9 plays to that. And yeah, they were chasing the game a little bit, so that plays into it as well. But surely the gameplay, surely this is what you've been saving Chris Carson for, is to go out there. Anyway, we'll come back to the game in a second. I just want to ask Adam quickly about that thought. Are the Seahawks too much an identity-focused team when really they should be just building whatever their identity is around the players that they have?
It's quite funny because the other sport I follow, English soccer, Jose Mourinho manages my team, and it's almost identical conversations happening with that team where you're trying to bring in a system which pretty much is, revolves around having a certain skill set of players. And if it doesn't work, you're you're always on the precipice of getting burned because you're running the game as close as you possibly can. You're not, keeping the pedal to the metal wherever you can. And the thing is, it's funny because the first time I came on this podcast, we mentioned how the Seahawks felt at the end of last year that it felt like the end of 2012. It's something that we've talked about a lot on this show. And they probably thought that, and they thought, well, they can take it in because they've got the same talent. But the talent wasn't there this year. And the thing is, the Pete ball, or whatever you want to call it, it will work really well if all of the cogs are in place and it'll tick and you can rely on the defense to do what it does. But the NFL isn't like that anymore. Teams don't hold other teams to 10 points. Even the best defenses don't do that. And the best offenses need to be a bit more varied. And you're right. I think there is such an emphasis on identity, but it's not even an identity that is, going to be anyone. It relies on the opposition doing things wrong and playing into your hands. And teams are just better than that now. My bigger issue with it is that, you can talk about Schottenheimer or Norton, but all of this stuff for me is above their pay grade and goes to the head coach. And that's not going to change. So I don't really know where this is going to go.
Yeah, and I think that's a concern because, as I wrote in on the blog just a moment ago, since the 2014 season where the Seahawks went to the Super Bowl, they've had 3 playoff wins against Minnesota, which relied heavily on a Blair Walsh missed field goal, against the Detroit Lions, who were a basket case, and against the Philadelphia Eagles last year when they lost Carson Wentz in the first quarter, was it? And had to play a 40-odd-year-old backup. That's it. In 6 seasons. I mean, that's not good enough. That should not. It's not spoilt to say that is not good enough. I know that's a thing that people have said, that we should just enjoy 12-4, winning the NFC West. I mean, for me, Robbie, winning the NFC West is a complete irrelevance now. There's no point winning the NFC West to go and get your asses kicked by the Rams in the following week in the playoffs. What's the point? The Rams are the Rams, as far as I'm concerned, are the NFC West champions tonight, because they came to Seattle and hammered the Seahawks in their own backyard in the playoffs, and they progress and they get to go and play next week, and not the Seahawks. To go back to the game, to go back to what we've seen tonight, and Pete Carroll has just started his press conference. He says he has no place in his brain for this outcome. Well, I'm sorry, Pete, but that's not going to cut it. I think there was so much wrong with it, Robbie. There was just so much wrong with it. I mean, why? We've talked a bit about the third downs and the offense and not running with Chris Carson, but I just keep coming back to the adjustment side of it. This is a game of adjustments. This is supposed to be, even if it doesn't work as well as you'd have hoped in the first half, that you come back in the second half and you find unless the Rams defense is just unbelievable, a legendary defense that there just has no weakness and no hole, there has to be something you can dig into your playbook to move the ball a little bit and get some momentum going. I mean, it felt almost like they ran out of plays within the first 2 drives. It was, what you're going to go to here? I'm not sure what they were trying to do, Robbie. There was no rhyme or reason to anything. It just seemed like late in the game, they suddenly started taking shots, which, just because they were chasing the game. Before that, they only really started running the ball once they'd really exhausted all the passing opportunities. There was no real emphasis to run early. It was always like, well, the passing game has completely fallen apart. We're 7 points down. We're going to run the ball now because that's the only thing we can do. And surely this should have been a game where you try and do that early. And defensively, Robbie, as well. I feel for the defense, because when your offense is playing as badly as that, it's always really difficult for a defense to essentially shut out an opponent. They gave up a lot of explosive plays, though. A lot of explosive plays. There were missed opportunities. The Jared Goff duck thrown in the air, and Jamal Adams is there, and it ends up being a huge, massive 40-odd yard completion instead. That didn't feel like there was much pressure provided by the pass rush. Bobby Wagner started well, and he whiffed on a big tackle when it was his gap to come and shut down. I mean, every facet of the team, apart from the field goal kicker, really comes out of this with a black mark.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I was talking about. Like, just like, where's the creativity in the offense? I mean, you don't see any creativity at all. I mean, the routes that they're running on the wide receivers are asked to go 15, 20 yards down the field and find a hole, and they're the routes are taking too long to develop, and they're not open, and so you're not getting any quick slants or quick passes. You're not getting Russ in rhythm. You're expecting all these big chunk plays, and I'm getting tired of, like, how do we not have one good play that you can call on 3rd and 4 to pick up 4 yards? It's mind-boggling to me that it's 3rd and 4 and we're throwing it 30, 40 yards down the field to try to pick it up. Same thing on 4th down. And I know it worked early in the season, but it just drives me nuts that we can't do something else to establish, some good rhythm and pick up a 1st down. And I mean, it's crazy that we didn't get one until the 3rd quarter. I can't accept that as being, just the way the game flowed and their defense was that good. Like, I just can't accept that. Like, you should be able to move the ball. You have a good enough team. Like, we have the players in place to make this happen. This is why I really don't think it's going to happen, but I really think Shoddy needs to go. I think Ken Norton needs to go, and I think Pete needs to relinquish a little control and give some up and coming, offensive minded coach that can get creative and get Russ in the right lanes and get him outside the pocket and do some things that allows them to get either the running game going or the passing game going. And when one's not working, that you can rely on the other, or a good mix of both. But really, it's if one's going, The other one's not, and it's incredibly frustrating to watch, and it's not something we deserve as fans. I think we deserve more, and that's why there needs to be some accountability, like you said, going forward. I just don't think. I think we're going to hear the same thing, Oh, I didn't expect that to happen. Oh, I don't know why we didn't. We lost the turnover battle. That's why we lost. I don't want to hear that. I'm getting tired of that coach speak.
Can I butt in there, Rob? Just
go, of course, I'll go for it.
It's I completely agree about Pete relinquishing some control, but my worry is that after the Buffalo game with the 3 picks, they obviously just dumped themselves with thoughts of the offensive strategy they were going to have, and they reverted to type. And Patrick Mahomes has thrown 3 interceptions twice this year, I think, but you can bet every penny you've got that the first game they have in the playoffs next year, Andy Reid has got full faith in Mahomes to be Mahomes. And I feel like the shackles were put on Wilson much more after Buffalo. I'm not saying that Wilson is blameless, because he's not played well, but I feel they scrambled themselves offensively so much after that Buffalo game. And, Pete reverted so much to type of what he thought is his way to play, that I kind of feel like whoever you give as an offensive coordinator is going to be one bad game away from being told, no, that's not how we do things here. And that's my main concern.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, let's just address the elephant in the room, because I think that we all know that Pete Carroll is not going to be fired. And the reasons are because he signed a new big contract, and the ownership is in complete flux. I mean, if you think that Jody Allen is going to fire Pete Carroll, she's not going to. It's not going to happen. But let's just hypothetically, the Seahawks have finished 12. It's a tough conversation to have, because the Seahawks are 12-4. They made the postseason. A lot of teams would want to be there. But I think there are a lot of reasons why the Seahawks would be 12-4 if anyone was the coach. A quarterback of some degree of quality, starred players on the roster, massive resource spent in terms of cap and future draft picks. I mean, really, they've got a roster that should be doing well. They played the NFC East in their schedule, and they played the AFC East. So it was a perfect storm in terms of scheduling in order to get to the amount of wins they needed to. In the division, the Niners collapsed because of injury. So these are the things that, also contribute towards success. How much of it is actually down to Pete Carroll? And if it was another ownership situation, is it time for a change? I mean, because I can't help but wonder a little bit, is this regime ever going to deliver Seattle back to the top? NFC Championship, Super Bowls, winning Super Bowls. Because we've seen it for 6 years now. The same thing happens year after year after year. We have the same conversation, it seems, year after year after year. We'll have another conversation now about Pete Carroll and the way he wants to play and all of this and yada, yada, yada. It always happens every single year. Are we just going to see 4 more years or 5 more years of this, and then Pete will retire? And how do you balance off that between wanting more and thinking, no, we need to see some more now. We need to see a change. Because personally, I'm not confident that the Seahawks are going to get back to the top with this regime anymore. I'm not convinced by that. I need to see that become a reality to believe it.
Yeah, I mean, here's the deal. Like, I'm going to go on record and say I love Pete Carroll. I do. And I will never forget what he's done for the city of Seattle and the Seahawks, and what Paul Allen has done and John Snyder. But at some point in time, that things kind of take their course and they end. And maybe this is one of those times where it's maybe this offseason Pete actually takes a look at it and says, maybe this is not what I'm doing. But it's hard. You're right. This is an uncomfortable conversation. We finished 12-4. We won the NFC West. We were right where we wanted to be. We just didn't play. We didn't adjust and do what we needed to do in the playoffs. So it's really hard to, have these kind of conversations. And there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be like, trade Russ, trade this, trade that, do whatever. I mean, I'm just reading your post here, and HawkFan 907 just said, honest question, is there a trade market for Pete Carroll? That he saw a report earlier that there was teams, out there looking to trade for coaches. And again, I'm like, I mean, it's a great question, honestly. Is there a trade market for him? But like, is he going to want to go take over the Jets? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, does he facilitate his own trade? Like, this is what we're talking about with John Snyder. Like, how does that actually work? You know, he has full control, you know, and he doesn't have a GM that actually controls him. So I don't think he can trade Pete Carroll and give himself more control. So there's a lot of things that just are interesting in the aspect of how this is going to play out this offseason. But yeah, I mean, this is a very tough conversation to have, but this is one that's going to be necessary. I mean, we need to figure this out, and I mean, clearly not us. You know, we can talk about whatever we want, but you know, I think this is going to be something that probably isn't going to happen until there is an actual ownership change. Because you're right, Jody Allen isn't going to fire Pete Carroll; she's give him a new 5-year deal, rightfully so. I mean, I think if I was in her situation, not having known anything, you'd give a guy who brought the team a Super Bowl and almost won a second one an opportunity to keep going, and it makes sense. But now you have to wonder, like, what happens with John Snyder? Are these rumors that are, you know, people are talking about, you know, him going to Detroit, or, you know, going to a team that gives them more control? What's actually going to happen there? And, you know, who do they bring in at GM? You know, there's going to be, it's going to be a really fascinating offseason, and one I'm not excited to start yet. I was not ready to start this.
We'll definitely get in. I really want to get into the off-season stuff in a bit. Just strictly on Carroll, though, Adam, yay or nay? I mean, how do you feel about this? We know he's not going to go anywhere, but should he? I mean, I don't know. I'm it's just a question that a lot of people are going to ask. I like Robbie. I completely have so much respect for Pete Carroll, but I also see a football team that for me is it's done a reset now. It's been 3 years. They've spent everything. They've spent the house. They're no nearer. They're going backwards. They've gone backwards from last year.
The first time you came on our podcast, Rob, I think was roughly 3 years ago, as the rebuild was about to start after the year they missed the playoffs. And we said, in 3 years, they'll need to be rebuilt. And then we'll see what we've got. I mean, they've actually got a team and a quarter here's worth of resources, really, because there's 2 first-round picks in this team as well for the future. So the amount that's been spent on this team, it's probably going to be the strongest team they're going to have for the next 2 years as well. Looking at how the roster's been constructed, what they've got to trade away, or the picks they've got to use, the players that the Seahawks pick up with their first round picks, the next 2 years, that's gone. So that is a concern. And in theory, if it was a 50-50 toss up, yes or no, Pete Carroll would be out the door for me. I know it's heartless to think that, but I feel like I've seen enough over the last 3 or 4 years to have a fairly good indicator of where the next few years are going to go, unless a man in his late 60s is going to dramatically change his standpoint on sport. That doesn't often happen. Could do with Pete Carroll. It's not going to happen. So for me, the biggest concern is how they're going to rebuild a team in his image to give him even a puncher's chance for the next 2 years, because they've given so much up to get this team together.
And that's it. That's where I come to really, Adam, with this. And I wrote this in the blog. I think that everything has to be on the table now. I really think everything has to be on the table. I don't think you can just keep going and going and going. I mean, like, when you look at this offseason, here's the reality of the offseason. The Seahawks have a few $1 million to spend. That's really it. I don't think people realize that unless they are going to make this cap $20 million more than the $176 million that is originally being projected, which they may well do, but fans have not returned to NFL stadiums. So I don't know whether that's still as likely as maybe they thought a few weeks ago. Who knows? Even if they make it 195 million, let's say, or 200 million, that still really only gives the Seahawks 25 to $30 million to spend. They've got Chris Carson out of contract, Shaquille Griffin out of contract. They've got KJ Wright out of contract. They've only got, I think it's about 34 contracted players for next year. You have a whole host of players on 1-year deals. Your Benson Mayoas, for example. Your Carlos Hyde, who are suddenly going to be free agents. You have a whole host of restricted or exclusive rights free agents. You're going to have to sign a large number of players next year. And that sort of, even if it is 25 to 30, it will evaporate quickly. On top of that, you're going to have a huge negotiation coming up with Jamal Adams, who's going to expect to be paid. People keep saying, well, you don't need to pay him straight away. You can wait. He's got another year on his contract. You can franchise him. This is a man who fell out with the New York Jets. Yeah, partly probably because they're a terrible franchise and weren't going anywhere, but mainly because he wanted to be paid. I don't think people maybe didn't watch every hour of the Combine like I did last year. Jamal Adams was a guest at the Combine. He spent his whole time at the Combine saying how happy he was with the Jets, how they'd had a positive meetings about his contract, that he didn't want to go anywhere anymore, that he wanted to stay in New York, that everything was great. He couldn't have been more glowing about his future in New York. And it changed because they didn't follow through on what he perceived to be a promise to pay him. So the Seahawks are going to come to a negotiation now where he has all of the leverage because they've spent the picks, and they might have to spend a large amount of their offseason trying to find a way to secure him a new deal. And is he even worth it, frankly? He was like the 45th rated safety on Pro Football Focus. He's clearly not the best in coverage. He's had injuries. They've had to blitz him more than any other player in the league at any position to produce 9.5 sacks. That's going to be a huge talking point. They have 4 draft picks maximum. I mean, I don't see the way that you take a step forward right now as you're approaching this offseason with the collection of resources that you have, unless your intention is just to try and bring every single player back that you've had this year somehow and just have another go with this group and find a way. I just can't see that. I'm not excited by that. I don't feel confident that that is going to produce a different result in 12 months' time. But I kind of feel that that might be what they do. I'd like to see a more brutally honest assessment of where this team is. There's a lot of players on this roster that have been here a long time and just they haven't been able to get Seattle to the next level. And all right, maybe there's not the dysfunction that there was in 2017 that made all those changes. For me, it's just they don't seem to be going anywhere. And it's a dangerous place to be in, isn't it? Because you have your elite teams who are going to be up there. And right now it's Kansas City and Green Bay, maybe in Baltimore, and I guess 1 or 2 others. Then you've got your really crappy teams who aren't going anywhere, who are in the process of a rebuild, like the Jaguars. They're going to get Trevor Lawrence. They've got a mountain of picks and resources to spend. They'll hope to be good in 3 years. And then you've got this huge middle class in the NFL of teams who have never really, some of them are good, some of them are bad, but overall, none of them have really got a chance of winning the Super Bowl. And my worry is that the Seahawks are very much in that middle class right now. They're not in the elite, the top of the middle class. And without some serious changes, whether that is a coach, whether it is personnel, that we're just going to experience Groundhog Day year after year, year after year, same thing. Wild card, divisional round, enough talent to muster a playoff appearance, but ultimately not enough to go much further than that. Is that unfair, Robbie? Adam?
No, I don't think so. And you start looking at it, even making the playoffs might be, questionable going forward. I mean, you look at the Arizona Cardinals and they're an up and coming team. They almost made it this year and they've got, more draft picks than we do and can keep building behind, Kyler Murray and they traded, I think my opinion was the best offensive move or best offseason move of the season was trading for DeAndre Hopkins. I know they're going to have to pay him, but yeah, I mean, that's like, they're up and coming and, the Rams are clearly one of the better teams in the league and, we have to keep up with them. And then you got the Niners, you don't sleep on them. I mean, they were decimated by injuries this year and, they get healthy and, I know they have some cap issues and a lot of players to pay. And, I was just reading a rumor today about them trading the farm for Deshaun Watson. And, I mean, they could be super dangerous if they get a quarterback like Deshaun Watson in the way that, Shanahan runs that offense and they get their running game going. I mean, they could throw anybody at running back and they seem to do well. So you have to keep up with it. Your NFC West, let alone, the rest of the NFL and, it's a lot of things. This is why I was saying, like, a lot of things need to change and you're going to have to make some hard decisions. You're going to have to decide, is Bobby worth 15, 17 million or whatever he's going to make next year? I mean, you drafted a linebacker for a reason. I mean, is he the guy? Like, he's kind of a trade chip. I mean, I don't know how much you would actually get for him. Probably only like maybe a 4th or a 5th, but I mean, if you need that money, there's a reason why you got to get rid of it. And yeah, as frustrating as that is, I love Bobby, but I mean, these are the kind of questions that you have to ask and you have to be serious about it. Like this is why one of the reasons, like, I respect Bill Belichick so much is that he seems to always be a season ahead of letting a player go and, bringing in.
So would Bill Belichick acknowledge the situation he's in now, Robbie, and would he consider trading Jamal Adams and Russell Wilson?
I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't know if he would trade Russell Wilson, but I mean, I think he would definitely consider trading Jamal Adams, and he seems like the kind of guy that just as long as they have to fit his system and what works for him, right? And I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know what he would do, but the reality is there we all see that there has to be changes, and yeah, 12-4 is great. I mean, we can all sit back and say that it was great to get 12-4, but in the manner of which we got there was frustrating, right? It was like we won incredibly close games that we probably should have just blown teams out, and then half the season the defense just looked terrible and half the season the offense looked terrible. It's just weird season. I don't know if it's just that 2020 vibe or what, but it's something that this offseason is going to be some changes need to be made, and I'm interested to see how Snyder handles it, and if he's even going to. Is he even going to be here?
Yeah.
Who else?
Well,
who's going to do it?
I don't think anything sums up the 2020 season for the Seahawks more than this, which is that Russell Wilson in the first half of the season was the clear runaway MVP. I mean, you wouldn't have got good odds on him winning the MVP, and he's finished the season probably having the worst season of his career. I mean, that's just incredible when you think about it. How can you go from such highs to being introduced on NBC ahead of the game against Arizona, I think it was, and the whole build up to the game is it wasn't the Arizona game, was it? It was the Minnesota game. He's the MVP. Let Russ cook. They're interviewing members of Seahawks Twitter before the Patriots game about let Russ cook. I mean, how do you go from that national fervor for let Russ cook and him being the runaway MVP candidate to the worst season of his career? I mean, that is just, it's an astonishing fact.
I think it follows on quite nicely from what we were saying on Wednesday on the preview show about there's probably not a set head coach and a set quarterback with such differing views on how the game should be played. And I got a call from a friend this morning who's not a Seahawks fan, but is an avid football watcher. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time talking about the Seahawks with non-Seahawks fans. So it's quite interesting to escape the echo chamber. And he said, obviously hugely tongue-in-cheek, but he said, if the Seahawks spiked the ball on first, second, and third down, and then just let Russell Wilson do what he wanted on fourth down, would they be better or worse on offense than they currently are? Obviously, it's a stupid, a hyperbolic question, but the point of the method of what they're trying to do versus what the quarterback can potentially do, I found it quite interesting. And it's funny because if you listen to any NFL media, NFL podcast, national show, they're all talking about how the Seahawks don't use Wilson as well as they should and how they run too much, and maybe they're all wrong. It's quite possible that no one watches the team more than a team's own fans, its own media and whatever, but maybe they're not wrong. And maybe it's the fact that the team isn't enough in Wilson's hands. And it probably was more this year than ever, but it still felt like it was Wilson's team with the reins on. And I guess if you're going to do it, you either got to completely, let him do what he wants to do just to see if it works. Because at this point, what have you got to lose by not trying that?
Yeah, he just looked thoroughly broken to me at the end of the season. It's not just today either. I mean, it's previous weeks as well. I know that at the end of the Niners game, there was a couple of drives late on and everybody kind of forgot about that. But in other games, the Giants game, you played particularly well in any of the games other than the Jets game. And let's not forget, the Jets won a couple of games at the end of the year. They were a winless team when they came to Seattle. So he just doesn't look right. And part of me thinks, well, you've kind of got to make a call here as to if Pete Carroll football, Robbie, is the way to proceed. What do you really need from that? You need somebody who can point guard. You need somebody who can move the chains effectively. Somebody who can throw the deep ball. All the things that Wilson is very capable of. But I get the sense that he wants to be Mahomes. He wants to be Aaron Rodgers, and I'm not sure that the current setup is going to allow that to happen. Carroll either needs to bring in somebody to run the offense and just give complete control to that person to do it and let him decide the best way to do it, or Pete Carroll probably needs to rebuild his offense in his vision, and that might be a very different offense to what we're seeing here. I don't know. I mean, I'm like kind of keeping a glance on what's going on behind my shoulder, in this other playoff game, and part of me kind of thinks a little bit, Pete would probably be a lot more comfortable with Tom Brady. Somebody just comes up at the line, gets them in and out of plays, throws it short, moves the chains, good on third downs. Yeah, Pete wants the deep ball, doesn't he? But, if you've got the right players, I guess you can get it downfield, even if you're Tom Brady at his age. But what he's actually got is a quarterback who wants to be an MVP contender, that wants to throw it a lot. I'm just not sure that the two are intertwined, the two are meshed, that the two are working anymore, Robbie. I mean, how do you feel about it?
I mean, yeah, we've saw what, Russ can do for the first half of the season. I mean, he's definitely capable. The problem is once they figured out what we were doing, and they got after him, everything changed. And I don't know if that falls on Russ just playing scared, or if he had one bad game and Pete tried to rein him back in and say, hey, like, you can't take shots anymore unless it's there. You're being too careless with the football. Because I mean, he missed a lot of open guys. He just looked like he wasn't wanting to throw the football, and he looked like a completely different player. So I don't really know if who it really falls on, but you're right. It's a combination of probably both. And this is why I want an offensive coordinator that can come in, have complete control over it, and have some creativity, because I just felt like Brian Schottenheimer plays, like, they took way too long to develop, and he didn't adjust. In that second half, when they started figuring out what they were doing, he had no answer for it, and this is where it falls on the coaching staff. And I don't know if Russ has the ability to change plays at the line, but he should do it a lot more. If he's uncomfortable with something and doesn't like the look, then he needs to change it. And if he wants to be one of the best, he needs to be really good at that. So yeah, I don't really know what the exact answer is, but you're right. I mean, something is off with the offense. There's something off between him and Pete Carroll. And if Pete wants to, if what he wants is a point guard, then trade Russ, trade him for a couple first round picks. Go get your beast of a running back, and build your offensive line the way you want, and get a point guard who can who can just control the game. But I think Russ has the ability. I mean, we've seen him. He's a superstar player in this league. I mean, for the longest time, people were always saying he's a top 3 quarterback. Let him be it then. Like, let him be it.
That's the thing. I don't think, and this will bother Wilson, and this is why I wrote the article last week, is that I don't think going into next season anybody's going to be referring to Russell Wilson as a top 3 quarterback, because this will be their lasting impression. It'll be this game, and this was not just a bad end to the season. This was a sustained, half a season with 12 touchdowns, and now a postseason flop like this. Wilson's legacy is going to be defined by what he does in the postseason. He's not had an MVP. His stats are great, but he's not been in sort of that Rodgers, Breeze, 5,000-yard type season bracket. He's going to be defined by what he does in the postseason, and they've not done anything in the postseason for 6 years, and that's just the reality of it. And easily for him, I mean, if you're him right now, I'd love to know what he really thinks, because I'm sure publicly he will say all of the right things. He will come out and he'll be very on message with the team, protect the team. Privately, does he blame himself? Pete Carroll's done the press conference afterwards, and the quote is, he wished he would have adapted better to the way defenses started to play them differently in the second half of the season. Which, I mean, I just don't know. It's ludicrous that you would say that immediately after you're one and done in the playoffs. Why were they not accepting that and adjusting 6-7 weeks ago? I mean, it makes no sense. But if Wilson hears that, and if that's what Wilson believes, is he pointing a finger at Carroll? Is he pointing a finger at Schottenheimer? And if they're both back next season, how does he feel about that? How does he feel if Pete Carroll is entrenched that Pete Carroll ball is what is going to be the way moving forward? How is he going to feel about that? Coming back next year, doing this again. I mean, I just feel that if you were to give him, as we said, it exact same thing in the last podcast, give him the truth serum. What do you want, Russell? He wants to win. But if he can't win, I think he wants to go somewhere. He's got the power. He's got the control. He can play the kind of offense that he wants. And increasingly, I'm just wondering if they're kind of stuck in this marriage now simply because Wilson has a reputation and you can't trade a quarterback. And yet Pete Carroll wants to run this certain offense. It doesn't really suit what Wilson wants to do. And they're never quite going to be all on board with everything. And when Wilson was coming through, when they won Super Bowls, let's just remember where they were. Wilson was a 3rd-round pick. He was the great story, the 3rd-round pick that comes through. And he helped just meld everything together because they had the great defense and the great running game. And in comes this guy with no expectation to be in the MVP in 2012 or 2013 or 2014. The good old guy comes in, runs the offense, makes some great plays, becomes a star. That's what it was. That is not where we're at anymore now. Wilson sees himself as a superstar player. Wilson doesn't, he's a stronger voice. He has stronger opinions on what he wants to be and what he wants his brand to be and what he wants his legacy to be. This is not the same as 2013. And I just wonder whether actually, if Pete Carroll's being really honest with himself, maybe he wants to be back in that situation where he's got a quarterback who doesn't want to be the MVP, who doesn't want to be playing a certain way, but he's just happy for the opportunity to play for a team and start as a young quarterback and run the offense that Pete Carroll wants to run. I'm not sure, because right now, this isn't working. And there is I think there is a clash between what Wilson wants and what Carroll wants. And I don't think there's going to be a coming together next season where all of a sudden they all get what they want and it all leads to success. We just keep seeing the same thing year after year. And this was a very disappointing exit. I mean, this was a horror show, Adam, in terms of a performance and a defeat.
Yeah, I think for all of that and for all of what Pete Carroll can say, I want them to run my offense. It's never been easier to complete passes in the NFL. All of the rules are stacked completely in the passing game's favor. And I've just watched Tyler Henneke, whatever his name is, the football team's quarterback, complete 2 outs to wide receivers, a slant to a tight end, and then an end around to a scat back. I mean, they just completed 4 easy plays. And where I do have a lot of sympathy for Wilson is, apart from some drops from Hollister and Disley, can you think of one easy throw and catch this offense completed from quarterback to wide receiver today? Because I'm thinking, obviously once the game gets out of hand, they're playing a prevent defense. But I think when it was a 17-point game or whatever, Wilson was 8 for 20. And I'm thinking that of those 8 passes, there was a throw to David Moore on the first possession of the game. There was the Lockett left-handed catch. There was a DK Metcalf catch for the touchdown. So there's 5 other passes in 3 quarters. And I think I tweeted it out that I don't think we've completed one just 3 5-step drop, 3 to 7 yard pass, just to get some rhythm, just build something. There was no pacing. There was no rhythm. Every play in its own right feels like this operatic, theatrical moment for the Seahawks. Whereas other teams just walk to the line of scrimmage, 3 yards, do it again, 4 yards, do it again, 7 yards. For us, everything feels so labored. And I guess that's where you put a lot of blame at Schottenheimer. But again, I just do feel like it's one rung up the ladder from there for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is one rung up the ladder. And I think a lot of people are going to be having the kind of conversation that we have right now in the coming days. I think whether you are, it'd be a water cooler moment, wouldn't it, in the past? But maybe it's on a Zoom call like we're having right now, where, before a meeting begins, or maybe you're ringing your buddies up, or you're talking to your husband or your wife over the next few days, or your kids, your brother, your sister, I don't know, your mum, your dad, and they're all probably going to be having these conversations, Robbie. I think that's where we've got now. I think after the Green Bay game, I can remember it well. The Green Bay loss, very disappointing, but you look at it and you think, okay, it was year 2 of a reset. They've got some good draft picks coming up, some cap space. Here's a real opportunity to take a big leap forward. We don't have that going into this offseason. And when you don't have the picks and you don't have the resources and you've got question marks and you've kind of made your moves, where do you go? Where else can you go other than this conversation? Is Pete Carroll the right man for the job? Is the relationship between what Russell wants and Pete Carroll wants, are they both going to be able to make this work now for the Seahawks? Are we just sort of delaying the inevitable here? Does there need to be some kind of a reset of sorts? It's very difficult to just keep going on and on. The Patriots did it with Belichick and Brady. Who else has done it? Which other teams do what they did? Are you better off maybe having a refresh that is more substantial than the Seahawks had 2-3 years ago? I don't know. We're all going to be having these questions because where else can we go right now about where is the future? And frankly, it's a difficult conversation. I think it's one we need to have about Wilson's future. I think that people should be willing to have the conversation about Jamal Adams. Is he really worth $18 million, $20 million a year? Has that trade, is it a success? Do you want to commit that kind of money to Jamal Adams for the next 2 or 3 years? Or do you just have to say that is not the right direction to go in right now? I don't know. These are conversations that need to be had. I've very little appetite, Robbie. I don't know about you, for just sort of having another go next year. It just doesn't seem. Maybe by September next year, we'll all feel differently. Right now, I kind of feel like we've wasted enough time as it is.
Yeah, coming off a loss is always hard, especially in the playoffs. So, the emotions are high. So I get it, and you start thinking about things in the future and where this team is going. And clearly, this is not the team that's going to win a Super Bowl because it didn't this year. And so you have to ask those questions. And where do you go? For me, I mean, I start looking at those contracts like, if you keep Russ, you need some things to help him. Okay. So in my opinion, as much as I think Chris Carson played well this year, they just don't use him enough. And I think there's a reason why, he can't stay healthy, and there's a lot of question marks about that. So if, in my opinion, you go out and get a different running back, one that can be the bell cow, someone that, can push the line and is the kind of back that they want. And there's a couple of guys that are available in that second round. I think you have to be willing to go out and spend your second round pick on another running back and just kind of admit your losses with the Rashad Penny pick or whatever and go forward with that and maybe bring Carlos Hyde back on a 1 year, $2 million contract or something like that. Cause he clearly has the ability to at least back up the starter. And I don't think you pay Chris Carson. I think you have to really look at Bobby Wagner's contract. We just drafted a linebacker, in the first round who seemed to play better and better every game. And so I think there's an opportunity for him there. I think you extend, KJ and Jamal. I really do. I think you have to look at trading him and seeing what you can get and see if, what do you have in Marquise Blair and see if he can play safety. And you got Ryan Neal and, see what you can do. I think you extend Carlos Dunlap, bring him back, and then I think you go after a third round or a third wide receiver. I think you need someone else to help out DK and Tyler. And obviously, I wouldn't spend as much money as they have on tight ends. I would see what they have in Colby Parkinson and let these guys play and Will Dissly and such and give these guys an opportunity to go out and prove themselves as young players. And you have to get younger. And one of the downsides to trading Jamal is that he is so young and he still has the ability to get better. I think, and clearly he's shown that he has the ability to help the pass rush. And, it seems that players really like him and he plays with emotion, but that can only take you so far. He's a liability in pass coverage. He there's a lot of things about him that you have to wonder about, and his ability to stay healthy. And props to him for playing with a separated shoulder and such, and coming out and didn't seem to bother him. And it sounds like he has to have off-season surgery. But here's another thing that's frustrating. You listen to the announcers say over and over and over how great the Rams drafts were, and without having any first round picks. And they're like, oh yeah, this Scott guy who they picked up in the 7th round is just destroying our playing at corner, and he's just destroying our wide receivers and been playing a great game. And like, where's that for us? Like I know I'm trying not to harp too much because I understand that we have gotten some players, undrafted free agents, Puna Ford, these kind of guys, but I want us to hit on our draft big time with the amount of picks that we have. We have to hit on these guys. We can't miss anymore. We put ourselves in a kind of a bummer of a situation.
Yeah, well, that horse has bolted, I'm afraid, with the last few drafts they've had. A lot of picks and not made the most of them. I mean, I'm just reading quotes. Yeah, look, it's always this always happens when you have a heavy loss like this. But this is a quote from Jared Goff after the game. 2 weeks ago, you saw them smoking cigars and getting all excited about beating us and winning the division, and we're able to come up here and beat them in their own place. It feels good, says Jared Goff. And I have to say, Adam, I've just not the noise surrounding the team has been one of real self-satisfaction, in my opinion, for the last few weeks. The smoking a cigar after you've won the NFC West on the podium, yeah, it was a great image, a great laugh, and I'm sure a few people will be removing that tonight from their Twitter avatars. But all the talk about the Seahawks Twitter account, we've won the toughest division in football, patting itself on the back, immediately after that, and all of this. I couldn't give. I mean, it was great to win the NFC West for the first time since 2016. Frankly, I could not give a toss about winning the division if you just come into the playoffs and play this way. All the celebrating, the T-shirt. I've never bought an NFC West champions T-shirt or hat in my life. What's the point? You don't get anything for that. You don't even get a trophy for winning the NFC West. I just find it I don't know, there's almost like a smugness, a sort of assumed quality amongst the Seahawks, almost like an entitlement, I want to say. I don't know. Maybe we're in danger of throwing the baby out with the bathwater here when I'm talking about entitlement and whether they should be open to trading this guy, that guy, whether Pete Carroll's the right guy. I mean, look, you can make all these changes, can't you, Adam, and end up with a really bad football team. Let's just be honest about it. You could just end up worse and going nowhere. But it's so poor. That was so bad today. It just give an air of a team that isn't going anywhere, and they don't really realize it.
Yeah, well, I mean, Pete said in his post game something about how he just assumed they were going to win today, and I think part of the celebrations from the NFC West championship were there. For them, it was probably, well, we're going to win every game, and this is just the first thing we can celebrate. I don't think they necessarily would have celebrated it as vociferously if they knew that they were going to be out on their arse 2 weeks later. But to come back to what Robbie was saying about the roster projections and things like that, I think everything you said is completely sensible, and every single thing you said bored me to tears. And not that you do, but the moves that you were talking about have bored me to tears. It's 2:30 a.m. I nearly fell asleep just listening to what you were talking about, the roster. And to bring it back to something, we were all listening when Russell Wilson said he wants stars on this team, and he wants, he wants more star power. He wants names. And I just wonder when he listens to this podcast tonight, which I'm sure he will do after his night at the Met Grill, is he going to be thinking, Adam's got a point there. This is a boring as F roster. And I just wonder if you gave him the choice of, look, you can have a bad year next year because we're going to blow the thing up, or we can bring back, Mike Upati and, Colby Parkinson could be, and maybe Marquise Blair and Ugo Amadi will do it. But I'm disappointed for next year already if that's what we're going to be looking at, because it just strikes me as more of the same, and it will be more of the same but worse. Sorry about that.
I have just sat with my head in my hands, because the thing is, Adam, is you are right. You are right. That was correct. That was beautifully put, and that is how I feel as well, Robbie. And I think that's how you feel as well. That's it. There's just so little to be excited about. And I'm sure that somebody will post on Twitter or on a comment or on a YouTube comment in the next few days that we've got Darrell Taylor's coming back. He practiced this week. And you never know, Rashard Penny will be able to fill the gap, because guess what? He ran that run against the Steelers last year. And there'll be people will talk themselves into it, because that is the way that fans operate. As I mentioned earlier, there's a huge swath, many of them, I think, in the UK, who are just, it's a privilege to be a Seahawks fan, and everything's great, and nothing's ever really that bad. And we never really want to question anything because we just love the team and love the players. But the reality is that this is a team that is not very exciting. They don't feel close. To me, this doesn't feel like we've just watched a bad day at the office, and that if they just regroup and come back next year, they'll be okay. And yeah, all right, they might lose this guy, they might lose that, but then Marquise Blair will step up to the plate, or Penny, or whoever like this. There's just nothing really that makes me think they're a year away. I think that they're a very expensive team with no resources, and they're a mile away from being a serious contender. That's how it feels, Robbie.
I mean, I agree with you guys. You guys, I mean, I hurt my feelings, but whatever. Thanks, Adam. No, I honestly, you're right. I mean, it's boring, right? I mean, it is. What else you talk about? Right. I mean, what else you trade, unless you want to get real fun and say, okay, we got to just blow it up. You trade Russ, trade Bobby, trade Jamal, get all these first round picks and such, and try to build from there. I mean, that would be the only exciting thing. Right. But I mean, the reality is this is the team we have. This is the cap situation we have. You have to look at what we got, and this is what we got. So we have to work with it. And I'm not saying I think there are pieces that we could add to it to make this team a lot better. Right. I do think we've seen what this offense can do. I want us to maintain that, right? I think adding another piece like a third wide receiver that could, get open, that help Russ out would be great. Right? I do think Apati needs to probably retire. We need to probably fill that position, and I think getting another stud running back would really help. There are a lot of things that we can do, but I don't want to see us to go out and get an aging Greg Olsen for $8 million and waste $8 million for what seemed like nothing. Like, there are opportunities to go out and do it.
Where
this
are they,
isn't
though?
the team.
I mean,
I don't know. We're gonna have to create. We're gonna have to create it. We're gonna have to create it, right? I mean, you've said before though, Rob. Like, there's always a way to create money. You said it before. There's ways to create money. We wanted to pay Jadeveon Clowney. There was a way we could have done it, right? So there's a way we can go out and do it. Like, there's a way we can go out and get these players or whoever we want. It's just we have to get creative. We have to make the right, the right draft picks and, whatever it might be. I mean, we have to make the right trades. We have to make the right, decisions on personnel now. I don't have all the answers like where we can do it or how we can do it, but I know you said it before, it can be done. They just have to be willing to do it. And I think part of it has to fall on Russ as well. Like, maybe he does what Brady does and takes a cap hit and, says, hey, I would rather have superstars and take a little bit less money. If you want superstars, then don't make us pay you $35 million. I mean, that's part of it.
Yeah, you're right. I have said that about free agents in the past. That you can, and the New Orleans Saints are testament to their ridiculous cap situation. So maybe they will be able to. Again, though, Adam, it just feels like, I think one of the points Robbie made earlier is the one that struck the most, is that this is the team we have. It feels like that. That's really what it feels like, that this is the coach that the Seahawks have. This is the team that they have. There may be some window dressing. There may be a new defensive coordinator, probably Gus Bradley or Dan Quinn again, or Chris Richard or whoever. And there may well be I don't think you'll fire Brian Schottenheimer. And there may be some window dressing, and like I said, but ultimately this is the team that they will just try and bring back everybody that they can, and that second round pick will go on possibly an impact player of some kind, and that's it. And I am so thoroughly unenthused by that. That just doesn't seem. It's nothing to get excited about.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that even with a change of tone of voice, you can kid yourself about a player. You can say Will Disley, or you can say Will Disley, and just in that thought, you think you've got a player there. And the problem is that so many NFL teams, especially, I don't think there's any league like it where you can fall into the trap of kidding yourself that what you've got is enough. And it does take a brave decision sometimes. But I mean, right now, I'm not comparing what we've got now to the Jeff Fisher Rams, because 8-8 is very different to 12-4. But ultimately, we're kind of dining at a slightly better table of purgatory than they were. But the last 4 or 5 years, we're sort of closer to that Rams team than we are to the current Chiefs and Belichick's Patriots team, which is where I think a lot of Seahawks fans want to position themselves. So something has to give in order to get yourself there. You can't say that you're this kind of team and then also say, well, you've got to be grateful for what you've got, because people seem to be talking about both sides of their mouth on the same subject here. And I think there needs to be a consistency of what we actually expect from this team going forward, because ultimately, we could finish 11-5 every year, but eventually that's going to get as useless as finishing 8-8.
Indeed. And I actually wonder if this game will act as a wake-up call, maybe for the team, maybe for fans who were willing to give the team the benefit of the doubt, which there's nothing wrong with that. We've said this throughout the whole season. If you want to be that kind of a fan, especially the crap that's been going on for the last 12 months with coronavirus, if this team gives you some real positive energy about it, just believing in them, then there's nothing wrong with that. I would never, ever accuse anybody of doing anything wrong by that. But I do think that sometimes there's just this assumed quality, like you say, Robert, Adam, that they should be, they're a Chiefs, they're a Chiefs level, or, right now you would say a Ravens, Bills, Saints, I guess, Packers, you want to put them in that, but they're not really. And part of me wonders a little bit whether if they'd have had next year's schedule this year, whether there were so many games that were so in the balance that could have gone either way. I mean, they were 12-4 and they deserve credit for being 12-4. Were they a million miles away from 10-6 or 9-7 or 11-5? No, they could easily have been. They could have lost against the Niners. They could have lost to Washington. They could have lost to the Vikings easily. They could have lost to the Patriots. They could have lost to the Cowboys. It was a 12-4 that could easily have been anything else as well. And that's the reality of where this season is. And they are going to be judged on what they do in the postseason. What they've done in the postseason is not good enough. This is not good enough. This was a terrible, terrible performance. And maybe one or two people who were willing to give them the benefit of the doubt before are now going to say, no, actually, I am a little bit more concerned about this. I just wonder whether we are going to see any kind of major changes. I think this will be an interesting week, because if they are going to fire coordinators, it will surely happen very, very quickly. The kind of thing that happens, 2 weeks down the line, is it kind of happens going out the door, and we'll see exactly what the difference is going to be here. Can't say that, Robbie, we've got about 8 minutes to go to wrap this up. I can't say that I'm particularly, I don't have a lot of faith right now in this team.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Yeah, I don't either. I want to find some hope, because this is obviously the Seahawks are my team. I want to believe that they have the ability to go out and make these changes. And I guess that's kind of why I was saying, like, if, maybe we could add a piece or two here, and maybe there's some things we can do, because I want to have that hope and belief. And it's really hard after a loss to have that. And this is what we've been have an hour of a bitch session right now about, where we're at, but, I'm still going to root for him next year, and I'll still hold my season tickets next year, and hopefully I'll get to go next year. And I'm just, I hope for the best. I mean, that's about all you can do at this point. And, but at this point, I don't have a lot of faith that they're going to make the right choices. And, if I'm realistic about it, I feel like, yeah, going forward, we'll probably not see, this will probably be a team that will finish in the 9-7, to 12-4 range almost every year with we'll make the playoffs, but then lose first round, second round, and not really make a big push. And I think we're wasting probably the best years of Russ's career. Even though he played, poorly the last, 6 games of the season, I still have faith in his ability to go out there and do it. I would like to see some more creativity on the offensive side, and, surround him with players so he doesn't have to do it all. And, give him an offensive line, even though I felt like the offensive line played pretty well this year, get a couple of the pieces on the offensive line to help him. And, you're going to have to, there's a lot of things we're going to have to account for. Dwayne Brown's getting up there in age, how much longer is he going to want to play? We don't have anybody to back him up. There's just a lot of question marks. And I think that's, with the cap situation and no first round picks, I think that's what gives me the kind of gives me the bummer feeling of like, wow, we don't have a lot going for us.
It's just every time we get onto a different topic, I keep reminding myself of the just utter complacency around this team. The dismissive questions about third downs, the dismissive questions about the performance of the offense for the last few weeks. Tonight, we didn't really care for the going for it. We were happy to punt in that situation. It doesn't matter. Just real no adjustments. Saying that you wish in hindsight that you could have adjusted better to how teams played you, it just doesn't seem right. And it's just been a really strange year of I have to say, incompetence, really. Starting the offseason by saying we're going to fix the pass rush, and your only 2 moves to be replacing Jadeveon Clowney with Ben Samayoa, and then bringing in Bruce Irvin until you get to the draft, and then you desperately need somebody. So you go and trade up for Darrell Taylor, who's not played a down this year. I mean, that is really is the most frustrating aspect of it, I think, for me, is just the complacency, the predictability of it all, and the lack of excitement. When Pete Carroll came to this team, he was introduced by Todd Lewicki as, we want to have our fans dream about championships every year. And it felt like a new standard had been set after a really horrible year under Jim Mora, where just everything was just all wrong. And I feel like in many ways, they have elevated the team to a new level that will never perhaps return back to the lows of 10, 20, 30 years ago. I just wonder whether or not this regime can get them back to the very top, and whether this team is capable of getting back to the very top. And it's quite an ominous thought to think that they never will do. And it's even more frustrating when you think that the Rams and the 49ers have been to the last 2 Super Bowls. Why can't the Seahawks get anywhere close to it? Adam, have you got a final thought?
No, I think you've summed it up quite nicely. I guess if there is a way to have hope, it's that Bill Belichick's taken the team to 7-9 this year. And, they'll bounce back because he's a top quality coach. I really hope that we've got a top quality coach on our sidelines and a top quality general manager and good people around him. At this point, all we've got really is hope. Do you know what I mean? And I can't go into 9 months of just being in a depressive state that, well, that's the end. So I'm going to try and give it the benefit of the doubt and say, well, they've done it once before, so let's hope they can do it again. That might be against my better judgment, but just for my own well-being, thinking about this team for the next 9 months, I'm going to try and put a positive spin on it and say that teams have bum years, and it's 12-4. It sounds ridiculous to say it's a bum year, but let's take the record out, because I think ultimately we were talking about this team in fairly negative ways for quite a while. And it wasn't because we thought the team were bad that week against the Jets or the Giants or the football team, but we thought it might be instructive going forward. And unfortunately, it's come to light today that all the fears we had have probably shown themselves why we were so scared. But I'm going to try and think positively, and that they can bounce back. They've got quality players in a lot of positions, and it's on people who are apparently the best in their profession to get it right again. And let's hope they can. But look, it's been nice to be able to chop it up for an hour and a half and try and get a bit out of the system. That certainly helped.
Absolutely. And I hope that, it has been a long podcast. I apologize. I personally feel like I rambled an awful lot through that podcast, a lot more than otherwise would have done. But I suppose that comes with the territory of an instant reaction podcast. We've tried to come here and give you some immediate thoughts at a very difficult time. And I hope that in some way at all it has helped, and that maybe just sort of listening to us going on about it and talking through some topics has at least given you some form of entertainment off the back of what was a horrible performance. I'll leave you with this tweet from Brock Heward. The Rams out-hit and out-schemed the Seahawks, period. That was such a difficult game to watch. The plan offensively lacked tempo, movements, creativity, and any answers. And the Rams' defensive line physically humiliated the Hawks' offensive line in ways you rarely ever see in a playoff game, sadly. And that pretty much sums it up. Thank you for watching the Instant Reaction podcast. Personally, I want to thank Robbie and Adam for, putting up with me and my views after every game. Thank you for coming on and giving us these thoughts immediately after the game, especially Adam, given it's very late for both of us now. Really appreciate your time, and I'm sure that the listeners will appreciate all of your views as well. I'm guessing, this is the end of the season now. I guess that me and Robbie will continue to do podcasts in some form, however regular. We'll let you know as we kind of look through this. But thank you for watching all of them throughout this season. I hope that it has provided something for your viewing pleasure over the last few weeks. SeahawksDraftBlog.com, well, it is the only website, I think, in the NFL that is dedicated to a team's off-season. So stay there. There'll be plenty of analysis to come. Lots of talk about the off-season to come as well. We'll break it all down. Hopefully see you on there soon. Take care. Stay safe. We'll speak later.